chargé d'affaires from the Iraqi embassy, his colleague. And thank you very much, Professor Jude, John Parkins, and indeed our guest from London, Dr. Zaidi, who is also an eye surgeon and also a good speaker about it. And of course, Adrian Christie, and ladies and gentlemen, and of course, Declan from the Garda Diversity. And this is 18th Nonsense Conference, as you probably would know. Traditionally, we have been doing it in the Adelaide Islamic Centre, Hussain House in Milton, for the last few years. And before that, we started from the churches in Taney Parish Hall in Dundrum, the very church that I started. And then we moved around the various different locations in the subsequent world church and subsequent world. Why we did that, the idea is that I think people who are here do not need to know who is Imam Hussain and why we do what we do in the month of Safar, in the month of Muharram. Please, there's the two chairs there. There's the two at the back there. So it's an annual calendar event that takes place worldwide, and the commemoration, conferences, meetings, majalises as we call it, is the word for meeting, lectures, eulogies, all of that takes place during the month of Muharram and during the month of Safar. This is a tradition worldwide, and thank God that we have got opportunity to practice this here in this great city of Dublin as well, which is a city of interfaith, and we have signed the charter with the Adrian Christie, who is the head of the Dublin City Interfaith Forum. So the idea is to discuss this event and this personality in a different way than we traditionally do. Traditionally, we have a ceremony of Imam Hussain with the eulogy, as I said, with the poetry, the lectures, passionate lectures, and describing the event, revisiting every year the history of this greatest event in the history of mankind that took place 1,400 years. So why people are still talking about it is something that you have to rationalize it, and we have to rationalize it. My idea has always been to bring Imam Hussain, who was the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, who stood up at a time to the greatest tyranny of his time, the ruler of Umayyad dynasty, who violated the sanctity, who violated the peace treaty that his elder brother Hassan has negotiated before him. And for him, the choices were very simple, either to accept this despotic ruler who has been violating the laws of Islam and laws of his grandfather, or to submit to his will and give an oath of allegiance to him. So obviously he introduced himself and said, a person like me can never give an oath of allegiance to a person like you. Just recognize who you are and recognize who I am. So how dare you ask me the hand of allegiance? So he said, okay, the option is to die. So since the whole journey started, and I hope I will listen to the speakers, the great speakers who has put together the entire discussion about this, Imam Hussain, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad. We also are lucky enough to launch a book, which is, I've ordered it, but Amazon did some thing. They have not arrived today. They should have arrived today, and we would have distributed it on people. But it will be here perhaps next week, and those who are interested in receiving it will post them free to those people. This is the greatest book, many books are written about Imam Hussain. 1,400 years, people as scholars are writing, doing scholarly work and all that. But this particular book I found it very interesting, it's recently been published, and it's by Imam Hussain Life and Legacy, Sayyid Ali Al-Hakim, who's based in Dubai, but he's a scholar, Islamic scholar. So it's an interesting, many other books have written. There's another book called Hussain and the Struggle for Justice by Chris Hewer, Dr. Chris Hewer, who's an eminent scholar who had a television in London. We will find him, and he's visited here many times and all that as well. So as I said, the literature about Imam Hussain has been, many literature, and has been continuously, people are researching, rediscovering, rewriting, and really talking about the Hussain history. My idea is to bring it out to those who do not know still. And it's not a Shia thing. Yes, he was a grandson of Prophet Muhammad. But at that time, there was no division between Shia, Sunni, Hindu, or any other religion or anything. Obviously, those religions were not there, but there was no division. So it's not a Shia event as such. Imam Hussain for everybody. It's for all those who believe in the values of humanity. And we will, again, here, I'm really grateful to the scholar like Imam, who's doing a PhD in theology at DCU as well. And of course, Jude will say a few words in the end. So I'm absolutely delighted to have all of you here. My greatest thanks to the people who traveled far from London. Dr. Farhan, Hussain, Zaid, and of course all the other guests as well. So without further ado, let me introduce you the first speaker. John, are you happy to go first? Or
well, if you like, I think the least should go first and the greatest should go last.
So you hold on.
So I'll come now, yeah.
No, hold on to it because you are connecting to the topic of the day. We're talking about Imam Hussain in the global context rather than just as a geographical context. We're talking about what is the relevance of Imam Hussain and why we should know him to date. Why? Because in terms of, we see the sign of freedom for Palestine, we saw the Palestinian scarf. So this is the, again, symbol of Imam Hussein's connotation that would be applicable in today's world. So therefore, we do have, as I said, a range of topics for people to cover. And I will start, maybe, Doctor, you would like to start with Dr. Mushtaq? Okay. Let's just start because you're under pressure as well at the time, so you might as well do that. So let me once again introduce Mushtaq Sultani. He's the charge of the affair of the Embassy of Iran in Ireland, which has recently been established.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this important conference. It is an honor to be chosen as a speaker at this conference. The importance of understanding the life of Imam Hussain is for all humanity, for what it carries of noble meanings, values, and knowledge. It is a support for the cause for which he came out. Peace be upon him, which is to reform the religion of his grandfather, the Prophet Muhammad, and to enjoin good and forbid evil. And from it, one can draw inspiration for values, lessons, and morals, sacrifice, and generosity of life. The Arba'in pilgrimage represents a meeting point between Muslims themselves and from all over the world in a religious demonstration in which feelings of brotherhood, love, harmony, coexistence, altruism, and sacrifice for the sake of others are manifested. The Arba'in pilgrimage has witnessed the emergence of positive cases of giving, dedication, sacrifice, generosity, and hospitality. The Arba'in pilgrimage is a symbol of societal coexistence as people of different nationalities head towards one place, the Holy Karbala. not separated by political, national, or partisan differences. They know that their greatest goal is to water the souls with love and tolerance among them. The Arba'in pilgrimage is a living model of cooperation in which all barriers between classes are broken. The Arba'in pilgrimage is a global humanitarian conference that is not specific to a particular sect of Muslims, but rather is not specific to Muslims themselves, to the exclusion of other religions, whether divine or man-made. Once again, thank you very much for inviting me, and hopefully we can gather in the next conference to celebrate the other religious demonstration. Thank you very much. Yes, I call my colleague Suraj, the moderator of the conference, to play some short video about the Al-Arba'in pilgrim. Thank you.
Give us some sort of a flavor of what's going on right now as we are gathering in the greatest city of Karbala and Iraq, from Najaf to Karbala. It's a traditional time of Arba'in pilgrimage walk. And this is the gathering of almost 20 million to 30 million people every year. And this is just a glimpse of that. This American young man who is traveling and he has experienced that. So it's a long, 20-minute video, but I won't play all of it because we have other speakers to cover it. So we just give you a flavor. So those who are interested, a little bit, just jot it down, the word Arba'in, A-R-B-E-E-N, Arba'in, which means the 40th day. And a few people in this room have experienced traveling there and experiencing this pilgrimage, which is the pilgrimage from city of Najaf to Karbala, and by walking. And it's a walk, the greatest walk that takes place. And what happens in that walk, this gentleman would have experienced.
Here on the outskirts of Najaf, Iraq. I'm actually walking along on the way to Karbala, Iraq. So it's about 70 or 80 kilometers north of here. I'm walking with my buddy Hussain.
The idea is just to explain that it is one of the biggest, as I said, pilgrimage walk in the world now. And the gathering of Muslims, and this is not restricted to a lot of non-Muslims are also participating in that, because what is happening in that part of the world since the fall of Saddam Hussein is that this walk has been restricted, just to give you the background. Now it's open up and people are free to do what they want to. I suppose the expression is to practice your religion is one of the fundamental human rights. In the Charter of Human Rights you would have the freedom to practice your religion, doesn't matter which part of the world you are in, and to express your concern about the situation you are in. And so that is a global reality now, and that is what is happening. So I would like to continue with the speakers, and I think if I may invite Dr. Farhan to come along to say a few words about it. Dr. Farhan Hussain is from London. He is an ophthalmologist, surgeon, and also a scholar of Islamic studies.
Distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank Suraj Bhai for inviting me. Very honored to be in this distinguished gathering, and also to congratulate him on assisting with this remarkable endeavor to raise awareness of Imam Hussain in Ireland for all people, and so that all can share in what the Imam has to offer to mankind as a whole. I've been asked to speak on the background to the martyrdom of Imam Hussain and what the purpose of the Imam was in terms of understanding what he aimed to achieve through the Battle of Karbala, and importantly what took place after the Battle of Karbala, which sometimes is neglected. There are people from various backgrounds here who all know who Imam Hussain was. The chronology is important. The Battle of Karbala took place in 61 Hijri, 680 CE, which was approximately 50 years, half a century after the passing of his grandfather. Imam Hussain in Islam was a child, a small boy, at the time of his prophet, of the Prophet of God, who dearly loved him. There is the famous narration, all Muslims except our Sunni brothers and Shia brothers, that when the Prophet was praying in sajda, bowing down before God in the masjid, he did not rise when Hassan and Hussein, his grandsons, then children, climbed on his back, showing how deeply devoted he was to them, and that they symbolized him in later life. And Hussein al-Islam is also referred to in the Quran in several ayats. But what happened between this period of time when he was cherished by the Muslims to when he was martyred, it beggars belief. It seems a huge transition in the position, the status, the regard someone who was so decent, was given within society. And in large fact, that reflected one of, I would say, the biggest ironies in Islamic history, perhaps in world history. That is that 30 years after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his worst enemies, the Umayyads, who for most of their life had been his bitterest enemies, like Nimrod to Abraham, or Pharaoh to Moses, they came to rule the Muslims through effectively a great deal of political and military struggle, and presented themselves as legitimate Muslims. It's in this period that we see many fabricated attempts, falsely portraying the Prophet in a negative light, start to be fabricated. You might ask yourself, what would your worst enemy say if he was given carte blanche to write your biography? The same happened with the Prophet. And we also see a transition in this period of time from in the early caliphate, which was the caliphs practiced a more austere form of the religion in line with the Prophet, to a transition towards materialism, a distinction between religion and state, and people no longer looked to necessarily the head of state as the center of religion. They started to look to alternative guides. We all know what happened, that the people of Kufa, which was a major garrison city and was the capital of the Islamic Empire as it moved east, invited Imam Hussain when the ruler for 20 years, Muawiyah, passed away. The new ruler Yazid insisted that Imam Hussain give him allegiance. The Imam said someone like him could not give allegiance to that particular king. On the way to the Kufans invited the Imam, who accepted their offer to become their Imam. And on the way, he was intercepted by forces of the king, who insisted that he give allegiance. It's important to bear in mind the Imam strove to avoid conflict, to avoid violence. He simply said, let me be, I will go, but I will not give my allegiance. Which is a right that we have in this democratic society as well, to peacefully say, we don't agree with what is going on, to express our views. But as you know, the king and his forces, led by Ibn Ziyad, and Omar ibn Saad, and others, refused that offer. And a bizarre battle took place, where the Imam was vastly outnumbered by tens of thousands of professional soldiers, and was trapped with a small group of people. You know, take this room, for example. He had maybe 72 followers traditionally, perhaps a bit more, over 100, facing an army of tens of thousands, including in his group of little children. Only one true soldier, his brother Abbas, who had a reputation for fighting. And they were massacred one by one in hand-to-hand combat. Even little children were butchered, down to his 6-month-old son. And afterwards, the women were looted, and a terrible procession of them took place through the streets of the Islamic Empire, hundreds of miles from Iraq into what is now Turkey, down to the Lebanon, Baalbek, and into Syria. And therein I'll come to what the secret was to the revolution, because we have the role there of Zainab, his sister, and Zain al-Abidin, his son, in propagating what had happened. Muslim scholars and non-Muslims have been attracted to Imam Hussain. And it's very interesting that non-Muslims across the world are singularly attracted to this figure in Islamic history in a very positive sense. They sense some commonality in their view of the world with this Imam, which they don't with other individuals in the Islamic world. Muslim scholars like Muhammad Rashari, an Iranian scholar, has said that the Imam's martyrdom can be understood at various levels. And as Muslims, and I don't expect everyone here to agree with this, first of all, there is this super existence of the Imam as the proof of God. And in the Quran, in Abraham's sacrifice of his son Ishmael, in Judeo-Christian tradition, Isaac is reprieved in the Quran for a greater sacrifice, that the sheep that was sacrificed instead, God said, I will save this for a bigger sacrifice, which Muslims believe was in Hussain on that day. I don't expect everyone to subscribe to that belief, but I'm going to focus on areas that people can appreciate. The second aspect, Rashari says, is that there's a difference between the short-term objectives of Imam Hussain and his long-term objectives, between maqsad, the short-term objective, and maqsood, the ultimate objective. In the short term, he aimed to be martyred. That is what many scholars have concluded. There is no doubt that this was no accident of history. Why did he take with him in his journey from Mecca to Iraq women and children? If he aimed to fight, he would have taken fighting men, not little children with him, including his own children to be slaughtered potentially. We see interesting facets to this journey. We see a powerful tribesman, Trimba bin Adi, who later on joined the Imam, but too late after he did not. On the way to Karbala, he promised the Imam tens of thousands of tribesmen, fighting men, who could join him. But the Imam spurned this offer. Now, if you were going to fight a war, you take with you every offer for soldiers. He had the offer of a big army, but he turned this offer down. And we have perhaps the singular, most powerful example of the fact that he did not aim to fight. He was forced to fight to protect his family of Abbas, his brother, who was known to have displayed uncanny valor on battlefields, who was, without doubt, a one-man army, a fully trained soldier. But out of all those people he allowed to fight, down to little children, he refused to let this only true warrior of his fight. That shows he didn't want to fight. He told him, go and get water for the children, but I don't give you permission to fight. It's a powerful observation which has catched as I'll come to, the attention of non-Muslims as well. In the longer term, the Imam's speech is important when he was leaving for Karbala from Hijaz, which is where the Muslims loved him. And he left Hijaz just before the Hajj began. So you had this Prophet Muhammad's grandson, everybody knows him, comes to the Hajj, but leaves just before the Hajj begins, with such a huge number of people there. He's drawing attention to himself and what he is doing. Watch this space. He knows he has to make a demonstration to the people what's to come. His speech is quoted by Khwarizmi Maqdal al-Hussain. The Imam says, I did not come out to make mischief or out of pride and vanity, nor to cause corruption and oppression. Rather, I have come out to seek salvation and reform in the nation of my grandfather. I wish to enjoin to that which God has directed and stop that which God has forbidden. The Islamic principle of Nahi anil Munkar and Amr bil Ma'ruf. And in this I follow the path of my grandfather and my father Ali ibn Abi Talib. So whoever accepts me in truth should know that indeed God is the source of truth, and whoever rejects me in this mission, then I shall be patient until God judges between me and the people by the truth, and gives his verdict between me and them by the truth, for he is the best of judges. You see in this mention not just the fact he aims to reform and save people, but that the actual mechanism will take place through the people. So how did he save and reform his religion? Surely Imam Hussain would have been familiar with the famous tradition of the Prophet, Hussain al-Minni wa ana min al-Hussain, Hussain is from me, I am from Hussain. Now, everyone can understand how a grandson is from his grandfather. It's a biological relationship. But how does a grandfather be from his grandson unless the grandson will protect the legacy of his grandfather? And as his grandfather was the prophet, that legacy would have been Islam. This is the famous tradition, in fact, inscribed on one of the grand members of Al-Azhar in Egypt, showing the universality of Imam Hussein's message. How did he save this? Now, when you study comparative religion, those religions which are not that old, that we don't know about their origins in terms of exact times, because they're shrouded in the mist of time. But if we look, say, we couldn't study Judaism or Hinduism in that way because they're far too ancient, but if we look, say, at Christianity, or amongst the Indian religions, say, Sikhism, we see a crisis in comparative religion happen about 50 years after the passing of the founder of that religion. This is because it's what I call the test of generations. When the first generations of those people who saw the founder of that religion, when they start to die through martyrdom or through just old age, there is a risk that the religion will not transmit on to the next generations. If it can pass that critical junction, the religion survives in society through the generations, and it becomes very hard to change that religion. You saw that in this country when St. Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland. If we look back deeper into Christianity, in the commentaries of the Gospels, we see in St. Mark, which was compiled, most of the Christians, and I stand to be corrected, will say it's probably the first of the Gospels, in about 70 AD, slightly before or after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. In other words, about 40 years after the passing of Christ. If you look at Indian religions, you see that the fifth Sikh guru, Guru Arjan, was executed and martyred in 1606, 60 years after the death of Guru Nanak, and originally held to his beliefs because he felt that if he capitulated to the king of the time, then there was a risk that the religion would not transfer further in the generations. And as a result, Sikhism entered into a whole new generation of believers, many of whom had never seen Guru Nanak. The religion survived. So this period between 40 and 60 years later is critical, and it's exactly in the middle of this period that Imam Hussain, 50 years after passing the Prophet, refuses to give allegiance. That's the thing. The Umayyads were systematically changing the religious nature of the Muslims. There are reports that idolatry had begun again in some a trade in idols between the Indian subcontinent and idols that were being found in Cyprus from old Greek and Roman idols. We see a number of changes to the practices of the old Muslims. We see racism enter the religion. We see a religion where those who are new Muslims, often we think of early Islam as being all-embracing. After the early caliphs, it changed, and a form of racism insidiously came in. It's regrettable, where newer Muslims were treated as second-class citizens. Non-Arabs could not enter Medina, or they had to be Muwallis to enter Medina, and they could not lead the prayers in the presence even of learned Arabs. It was these systematic changes that Imam Hussain aimed to refute by refusing to give allegiance at this critical point in history. Now, if you had a religious leader now who tries to reform the religion, it won't have that big impact. But at that point in time, the religion would have been significantly distorted. Furthermore, for 20 years, the Muslim people had become docile. They had not opposed this systematic change to their religion. When that group of Muslims, that tribe, who had been the worst enemies of the Prophet, were ruling the Muslims. And a wide body of Muslim opinion, Muslims believe that many of the Umayyads never sincerely converted to Islam. That was an opinion offered by early Muslims such as Umar ibn Khattab, through to Ali ibn Abi Talib and other Muslims as well, that the Umayyads were weak in their belief. The Prophet had said, interestingly, that Hussain would create a fire in the hearts of the believers in a certain way, and I believe it referred to the fact that he would rekindle the dying flame of Islam. How did he do it? And if I come back to what I said at the start, after his martyrdom, it wasn't that was the actual revolution that saved Islam. That was the model, the paradigm of what happened. It was, in fact, this horrible journey from hundreds of miles from Iraq to Syria, which backfired upon the rulers in that his sister, Zainab, a lady in her 50s, and his son, Zain al-Abidin, a young man in his early 20s, together with other members of that terrible caravan, propagated a message as an ongoing demonstration for many weeks, an ongoing protest of what happened, telling people, as a media organization does, this is the outrage that befell the son of the prophet. What this did is to create a movement, a change in the hearts of those docile Muslims, which in effect galvanized them to action. When they were finally released from prison, they went back to Medina over a year later, and on hearing of the outrage that had taken place, the ruler lost control of both Iraq and the Islamic heartlands of Hijaz, which are now Saudi Arabia. Effectively, Imam Hussain in this sense wasn't just a martyr in the Arabic or Farsi or Urdu sense of the word, which is just someone who gives his life for what he believes in. He's actually a true martyr in the English sense of the word, in that someone who dies for what he believes in, but also inspires others also to give their lives to what they believe in. That's an important distinction. The result was that although these revolutions took place and many were put down very brutally, 70 years later the Umayyads were brought down by a revolution calling for vengeance for Imam Hussein's murder. But most importantly, the fact that these revolutions may often have been led by politically cunning men is irrelevant. The people had changed. The people were now prepared to stand up for truth, for justice, for their religion. And in doing so, the king had shot himself in the foot. If he aimed to destroy the religion, the flame, the knowledge of Hussein's martyrdom rekindled that dying flame of Islam and allowed it to pass this challenge of the generations that all religions face. And the religion could enter the generations, a whole new generation who had never seen the Prophet, now were prepared to live and die for their religion. The religion today stands as testimony to the success of Imam Hussain. That is how he saved the religion. And I'd like just to finish on what were the themes that were conveyed by this caravan, sometimes called a caravan of light, that attracted people to the message, what changed their hearts. We see exceptional humanity in the Imam's message. We see a form of Islam even in the early days. We see two forms of Islam. We see Imam Hussein's form of Islam, where dying of thirst, with thirsty children, a shortage of water, he gives water to enemy soldiers. Those same individuals who forced him to stay there and to be killed, and who would deny him water. Who would do that? So from the early days we see a form of Islam where water is given to enemies, and another form of Islam, his enemies, who killed little children and babies and women. And I'm going to go a bit further. I'm going to say there are two forms of Islam to this day in this world. There is a form of Islam that is symbolized by Imam Hussain, which is very attractive in its universality to all decent human beings. And there has been a form which was almost ugly and unrecognizable as even human in its manifestations, the way they treated their own prophet's grandson. There is immense forgiveness in Hussein's message. Hur was a senior general of the army of Yazid who forced the Imam to stay in Karbala and would not let him go. And Hur not done what he did, the Imam would not have been martyred. But on the day of Karbala, Hur had a change of heart and came from the side of the enemy to the side of Hussein with his son, his servants, his brother, and several other soldiers to face certain death. A great act of repentance, but greater still was the forgiveness that Hussein gave to Hur and other soldiers. It's accurate accounts saying that even before his beheading, after his children had been murdered, Hussain was trying to forgive those who had committed these murders till they passed a certain threshold of non-forgiveness. He said, go away. If you leave even now, I will forgive you, just before his beheading. There is justice there. As I said, racism had crept into Islam. It was not there in the time of the Prophet. It was not there in the time of Ali, or Hussain, Hussein's father and brother, but it had crept in later on with the Arab Empire. But we have the example of John, a black man in Hussein's army. And it's sad that black people have been treated very negatively in many cultures through history, not just in Western culture, but in Middle Eastern cultures as well, and as well as in South Asian culture, if you look deep in history, in the part in India as well, right, which my family all come from. But this black man, who was of relatively low birth in society, was elevated to the position of a knight, effectively, in Hussein's army on the day of Ashura. And John was given the position of fighting at the very vanguard of Hussein's army, a position he thought he would never be given by Hussein. And symbolically, Muslim traditions say that John's blood, after he'd been murdered, was lying in a pool at the bottom of a sand dune. Hussein, who had been murdered, his blood was in many places, but it moved down that sand dune and became one with John's blood. It's a deeply symbolic symbol of equality in Karbala. And there is the exceptional loyalty of his brother Abbas that has attracted the interest of military tacticians, including, I've seen a reference to it, Napoleon Bonaparte. A man who had lost his own children in battle, was a 34-year-old trained warrior of immense military ability, yet was not given permission by Hussein to fight, obeyed the orders of his brother, and went to get water without a sword, so that he did not, because Hussein did not want to fight. But Abbas was murdered with his arms were amputated getting water. But as an act of loyalty, though he had no arms, went in the opposite direction back to the river to get water, even though he had no prospect of fulfilling that flask of water, for he was now armless and had no flask. He was carrying out the will of his brother. It was these sterling messages from the Battle of Karbala that would surely have inspired the Muslims of their time to reclaim their heritage of their parents as Muslims, to allow Islam to transfer into a new generation. And the role of women cannot be underestimated. Zainab, a lady in her 50s, whose hijab was taken off her, was paraded in this horrific manner, and yet the eloquence with which she spoke against a king has gone down while she was chained, has gone down as one of the greatest speeches in Arabic linguistics, and it is on the internet for you to read, showing the important role that women have to play in leadership within society. It is for these reasons that Imam Hussain has inspired Gandhi, Nehru, Mandela. And Mandela's grandson was one of the Arba'in processed recently, 1 or 2 years ago, to hold Imam Hussain up and to allow, they've constantly acknowledged that he did allow them and did formulate their views on passive resistance and on opposing tyranny. Mandela in particular, it's touching that he said that once he was almost broken by the South African police through a process of solitary isolation, that they wanted him to sign some documents to effectively confess to crimes that he had committed. And he almost signed them until he thought of the resolve of Hussein, who sacrificed his own family but did not succumb to tyranny and did not compromise his principles and would rather die for them. And he went back to his cell and did not sign those documents. But also, just to finish, there is this universality in Imam Hussain that is seen in Arba'in. And as the respected delegates from Iraq and other countries would note, that there are in the Arba'in processions not just Muslims, but Sunni and Shia. We see Hindus from India and Sikhs there. I was struck by that when I've been to Karbala. We see Jews from Iraq and further afield. And we see not a fair number of Christians, including very high-ranking Christian priests, who attend these commemorations, showing the very special nature of Hussain to these individuals. I don't think any other Islamic figure has that appeal. Even in Karbala, there was a link between Hussain, for example, and Christianity. A number of the individuals who joined his army at the last minute were, in fact, Christians. It's clearly showing that there was some universality in what they saw in him and what they believed to be the path of truth, and they were killed with him. In this journey that his family took all the way after his passing to Syria, in Aleppo, which you will hear of in the news these days, the Syrian city of Aleppo, you will see that the Christian priests there were moved to great sympathy for the plight of Hussein's family and showed them exceptional kindness and decency, and even took the head of Hussein, which was decapitated, and did their best to cherish that head and to treat it with respect, and to give water, food, clothing, and as much hospitality as they could to the women and children in his caravan. Hundreds of years later, in Christian Spain, it's interesting, if you research the topic, you will see a similarity in some of the mourning practices in the period of pertaining to Good Friday in Spain, which is commemorated with great solemnity and pageantry. You will see similarities to Shia Muslim mourning processions, the beating of the chest, for example. If you research this, there's a very interesting book that is published by a Spanish author recently. Some of these practices came from Imam Hussain. There were some Shia dynasties that used to commemorate the mourning of Hussain in Spain, in Andalusia. They were not just Umayyads, the Spaniards, but these individuals, although Islam left Spain in the Inquisition, some of their ritual practices persisted and were taken by Christian Catholics in that country, perhaps suggesting a common theme of remembrance, of redemption, which is a theme in mourning Hussein and is also a theme in the Christian commemoration of the Passion of Christ. And then we have contemporary scholars as well, and I finish on that. We had mentioned there of the work of Chris Hewer, who has written specifically on Imam Hussain and his salam and it's on television. The Anglican priest, Father Frank Geller, who regularly joins the Arba'in procession in London and speaks every year there on the topic of Imam Hussain, upon which he has written and gone into great depth, in fact, on all of the Shia Imams. And most recently, from the Catholic perspective, in Rome, Father Christopher Clohessy, who was interesting, has not just written on angels that hastening on the martyrdom of Imam Hussain in Islam, but he's also written specifically about individuals from the Battle of Karbala. Fatima, daughter Muhammad, is the book of it, but so is the narrative of Zainab, daughter of Ali, that he has written, and most recently, the outrider, Abul Fazl Abbas, Hussein's brother, who Hussein did not allow to fight on the day of Ashura. It's fascinating to see Catholic priests actually writing books, serious academic works on these individuals from Karbala. Imam Hussain uniquely attracts the interest of human beings who search for a common humanity and a higher level of existence that we should all strive for throughout the world. And that's, I think, is one of the final purposes and messages from him. His sacrifice is to help inspire mankind to a common humanity, as befits the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad and the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who said, another human being, as you well know, another human being is either your brother in your brother in religion or your brother in humanity. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Quite an in-depth scholarly breakdown of the entire background of why we are here this afternoon. What I can deduce from your wonderful talk is the fundamentals of two forms of Islam that you kindly mentioned. And indeed, we need to educate ourselves and distinguish ourselves what's what. Who are the followers of the Imam Hussein's type of Islam, and who are the followers of the enemy of Imam Hussein's type of Islam, which still exist, unfortunately. I was absolutely flabbergasted and moved. I couldn't sleep at night. I saw a slaughtering of a human being in Pakistan this Muharram. The man was beheaded from here back. He was being thrown down on the floor. So this is the kind of thing we're challenging today in our lives. And therefore, education is the key for knowing what kind of Islam we should support, we should back, and we should understand. And we should raise our younger generation for that type of understanding of the greatest religion in the world. One of the greatest religion in the world, I would say. The other important point I would deduce from that is that, as you kindly mentioned, non-Muslim John Wahab Kalbi was another individual, and his wife, newly married couple, near the camps of Imam Hussain. Well, the night of the battle, he went and met him, and he was just newly married and he converted to Islam and he fought for Islam and for with Imam Hussain. So, in the history of Imam Hussain, the more you dabble into the literature of Karbala, Hussain, Shia Islam, you will find the greatest gems of within the historical background. And indeed, we will continue to shed light and to bring it forward in today's life, that what is happening in our lives today has a relevance. Imam Hussain has a relevance. It's not pages of history that we can shun him, and we only visit him in Muharram and Safar and do not relate to him in day-to-day life. We must relate to day-to-day life, Hussain. Only then we can understand the correct picture of Imam Hussain and the correct picture of a peaceful version of Islam. Now, with those words, I may invite Karen Imam, who is a scholar in DCU, a PhD scholar who has done a great work, traveled to Arbaeen and traveled to a conference in Tehran as well, and the conferences, so she'll talk about that as well. Thank you very much. Please, and it's yours.
I'm not too sure if anybody can see me, but maybe you can hear me, yes?
It's a small room.
Just have to up there. Last year, I spoke about the beautiful Zainab, and it was very hard to speak in Hussain. So this year, while listening to your beautiful speech, I tried to hold it together, but the hearts are always open. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear respected elders and learned scholars, esteemed guests, colleagues, friends and family, I welcome you with the Islamic greetings of peace and blessings. Trinity is indeed steeped in history. Established in 1592, it is Ireland's oldest university with a reputation as a research centre for Islam. So it is indeed an honour to speak with you today, especially regarding where we are in the Islamic calendar. We are commemorating the 18th Imam Hussain Conference in Dublin this year, and it is a testament to the enduring love of Imam Hussain which allows its continuing success. With this, I'd like to thank the Honourable Sayyid for his invitation to speak this afternoon. In light of the core theme for today's conference, it would be remiss of me to continue without mentioning the impeccable strength and fortitude of the students of Trinity College Dublin, consistently campaigning on boycott, divestment and sanctions. Since before 2015, they have encountered innumerable setbacks, yet indicative of a renewed exacted sense of justice and purity of intention and purpose. They secured key victories such as student union divestment. They increased the support for the BDS campaign and ensured the college's divestment from weapons companies supplying the Zionist regime. Trinity has further strengthened their resolve in establishing support for the Palestinian cause, just as it did against South African apartheid. The Irish School of Ecumenics has a long-standing academic and scholarly tradition, which is evident in its expansive tome of highly regarded literature. Its publications and a multitude of academic endeavours in promoting the weighty properties of meaning and purpose play a critical role in society. Occupying a difficult space, it proposes that it can be manifested through a central axis of social justice, branching out on numerous levels, such as the socio-legal, socio-economic, and the socio-environmental, and so on. As an academic and theologian, I value this work. It is not only a comprehensive and cohesive study of academic integrity, but it further helps to locate the concept of spirituality in a practical and working framework. Committed to building peace and reconciliation within and between nations and in and between faith communities, the late Reverend Michael Hurley worked from a motto themed, "May it flourish in order to perish." This is the founder of the School of Ecumenics here in Trinity. Inspired by this, the former Chief Herald of Dublin Castle drew up an emblem depicting a sheaf of wheat, of which the respected late Reverend commented, "Our motto reminded him of the dying and rising involved, not only in the glorification of Jesus, but also in natural growth and in the sacrament of the Eucharist." He remembered the Johannine verse 12:24, which says, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain, but if it dies, it bears much fruit." This beautiful depiction is highly relevant for the theme of my speech. First, though, I lay out the context from which the key components of attaining true justice and liberty is a complex endeavour without first extricated from elaborated upon and brought to its fullest fruition through the Arba'een pilgrimage. The esteemed scholars such as Kathy Higgins and Kirsty Wright's work as editors of the Irish School of Economics publication, Is There a Common Good?, partnered alongside similarly produced programmes and supporting documents. The reader meets topics such as human rights, economic justice, inclusiveness, hopefulness, in which the former President of Ireland, Mary McAleese, contributed a paper called Valuing a Common Good, Reimagining a Just and Shared Future. Throughout the affirmation programme, scholars and academics consistently make a very clear point of the necessity of being familiar with history, quoting, "It is not competitiveness or claiming original or ultimate supremacy or superiority, but whatever source you draw spirituality and the spiritual from, getting on the quest of living is key," and this is according to them. Indeed, this is an excellent point. However, with the triumph of Western individualism, it is a difficult barrier to overcome. In referencing the element of spiritual intelligence and its innate relationship with the human being, it suggests we as humans still long for many purposes and values, and many issues of meaning, purpose and values are heightened for people in conflict. The difference is that the Arba'een one is presented with these elements in a natural setting, ensuring that its emanation is an ongoing, lived, organic praxis. It is safe to say that the majority of leaders of communities, nations and global affairs employ a visional framework and a system to reinvigorate a comprehensive stance of wholeness, a sense of unity and purpose through diversity and inclusivity. They endeavour to map their intended application and praxis, which are rooted firmly on the values of love, compassion, justice, non-violence, reconciliation, peace and relational humanity. Evidently, when the Irish School of Economics studied their prophetic and philosophical enlightenment, they give due diligence and time to the brilliance of Moses and Abraham, Socrates and Plato, Hume and Ferguson. They allude just to a few notable shining lights in history, and rightfully so. They have their place in history. However, there is a name missing from the content of the Common Good programme, but it is not unlike the vast amount of Western academic ventures today. This omittance is arguably the underlying cause of the unfulfilled potential of the most sublime theory and practice of the meaning of supreme justice, that of Imam Hussain. Implementing this blueprint individually has proven to be groundbreaking and has the power to transform entire global societies. The majority of people are simply not aware of the Arba'een pilgrimage, nor the historic events preceding it, which points to blatant and ongoing obfuscation of the events leading to after the heinous murder of the Holy Prophet's grandson, Imam Hussain, a mere 50 years later. The Arba'een is a journey that's simply the word's truth. It is the reimagining the Irish School of Economics and others speak of but cannot find. It is the practice and remembrance from a place of pure love and wholeness, unity, diversity and inclusivity, not only experienced on a macro yearly basis, but on a microcellular basis. So no matter how much the oppressors try to hide and obliterate the events leading to the Battle of Karbala and those thereafter till today, it will always remain alive and renewed each and every second. Despite oppressive regimes from Bani Umayyah through to Saddam's despotic rule, they did everything in their power to obliterate Imam Hussein's and the noble Ahlul Bayt's legacy. The world's largest pilgrimage is only gathering momentum, not only physically but spiritually, always pointing us towards the return of the Imam Mahdi. With a consistent average of between 22 million and 25 million people from across the globe participating in the Arba'een pilgrimage on a yearly basis, this equates to approximately 0.3% of the total population of humanity. These are major signifiers of preparation for the emergent return of the Imam Mahdi, so that Imam Hussein's legacy of ultimate justice is met. Research has found that the pilgrimage walk is not just a singular practice, not individual, and realising this leads to a more significant transformation. I worked on my dissertation last year, which looked at the attachment to sacred spaces and confirmed they are crucial as they facilitate and strengthen religious identity. This is why, under Saddam's rule, he routinely ordered the bombing and destruction of sacred locations core to Shia beliefs. Shared emotion is also another finding of the investigation, and are at the epicenter to religious ritual which gives rise to unity and empowers positivity, as the anthropologist Turner proved. On the Arba'een pilgrimage, we forget ourselves and live as a whole unit. It is something remarkably breathtaking and life-changing. Thus, we know that spirituality is the main axis of personal experience through that pilgrimage. The human is lifted and confined in every capacity except one. This is the heart. And ingrained in the heart of every individual is the innate appetite for the eternal. No amount of this world will ever suffice. Allah says that there is only one thing He created that can contain Him, and that is the human heart. Speaking of the human heart biologically, there's any biological doctors in this place, I don't know, but forgive me if I get this wrong. Speaking of the human heart biologically, after emptying itself, the heart relaxes and expands to receive another influx of blood returning from the systems of the body, before again contracting to pump blood to the lungs of the entire body. Just as the Johannine verse above, this is another stunning reflection and manifestation of the cosmic city of Karbala and its divine history. An earlier look at the sacred burial places of Imam Hussain, his esteemed family members and loyal compatriots, and those who are martyred remind one of the human heart. All the blood must flow there and come back refreshed. And just to note, a healthy heart beats at 72 per minute. Mine's probably going too fast right now. Just to note, a healthy heart beats at 72 beats per minute, which has connotations to the number of those martyred in the Battle of Karbala. From my own experience on the Arba'een pilgrimage in 2022, I still find it extremely difficult to articulate. As it marks the 40th day of official mourning, the immensity and impact of my soul and heart is eternally engraved with the love of Imam Hussain. The audaciousness of the noise, the silence of deep grief, the whisper of death and the immense heat of the day, the sudden sunsets and brilliant dawns, the sheer beauty of humanity in its wholeness, in experiencing itself, always a witness to the eternity of cosmic dimensions, all aligned to the ultimate truth of the meaning of the world, of humanity and itself. In conclusion, earlier I spoke of the weight of the true meaning. What makes a difference in this world of a multi-level of destruction? This seems to be a world without justice, with multiple incursions and atrocities too numerous to list. This points to the common good papers from the Irish School of Economics and other research. In my opinion, this logically presents the innate need for reliance in this world, which is in stark contrast to current trends. However, many of the world's religions consistently point to this, and indeed it is the Imam concept of the school of the 12 Shia points to. Imam Hussein's uprising rests on three pillars: the intellect's natural disposition in resisting oppression, and the courage, fortitude, commitment and loyalty to never giving up, which is buttressed by the love and compassion associated with the entire family of the Holy Prophet, which we see manifested annually in the world's biggest pilgrimage. They say Paris is the city of love. Those who say so must never have been to Karbala. I walked from Najaf to Karbala alongside 23.5 million others. Every step took us closer to the city of love, the city of lights, the city that never sleeps, a cataclysmic force between the profoundest of grief with the purest of love. Labbaik ya Hussain. Thank you for listening.
Another perspective.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah, no, sorry.
Another perspective, as I said, for many things, I would say that this is again a discussion. The most interesting point you mentioned was Karbala is no doubt is the heart of Islam, and indeed it is the heart of Islam. If you think about it, the Islamic landscape, the more you know a Karbala, the more you would understand. Wrongly confused, people get confused about, the other powers of the Islamic world based in Mecca and Medina. No doubt they are holy shrines, they are the greatest heart of Islam as well. But Karbala is no longer can be neglected to the world. And indeed, correlating with the 72 beats, it's a revelation for me today. Indeed, very well put together. Imamate versus Khilafat is another thing that you mentioned toward the end of your talk. Imamate is the system of Islam that has never came into practice. What happened was that Khilafat has been imposed on Islam over the centuries, ever since the Battle of Karbala even took place, and before that. So those who are interested to know the difference between the two, I think you would dabble into it again, Imamate versus Khilafat, and you would know better Islam through the light of Imamate, which is continually, and it's alive. It's not buried and dead like other religion. When people say that, okay, there was a religion, now there is no religion. I do not believe in God, I do not believe, and the greatest trend is obviously agnostic behavior, and I'm a non-believer. So if you come to the Imamate, you will continue a live religion, a live system of Islam. The management exists in practice as well, if you care to study that. I will always say that Karbala, the Battle of Karbala, is the shortest battle that started at 5 a.m. in the morning at dawn and finished at around afternoon, 4 o'clock. But is the longest battle remembered, talked about, and existed in the history books and the hearts of people. This is the miracle of this smallest, shortest battle between right versus wrong, between haq and batil, as we say in Arabic. What is right and what is wrong, in a nutshell. May I like to invite Adrian, our friend of the conference from the Dublin City Interfaith Forum, to shed his light on the thoughts on this day. Thank you, Adrian.
Guests and friends, and I bring you greetings from Dublin City Interfaith Forum, whom I work with, and I've been working for the last 12 years now. And I want first to thank Siraj for inviting me again to share with you
coordinating.
in insights. It's not my first involvement with the conference. I was here last year. Well, not here. I was in Aberdeen in Hussain, and the year before, and the year before, and so on. So, but it always gives me, it gives joy to my heart to look at Imam Hussain and the legacy is left behind, and how it affects everybody's life at certain times. Harvine has been mentioned, and it's right, it's not known as it should be in the world. Now, having said that, I'm going to look at events that happened 1400 years ago, and they're so alive in our lives, in our existence today is baffling. A lot of people can't understand how come, why what went on 1400 years ago is still so relevant. I didn't know why, but having been part of this event for so many years, I'm beginning to, and I'm still not there yet, but I'm beginning to get a better understanding. As I said, 1400 years ago, Imam Hussain fought and gave his life to eliminate despotism and create a just society that values liberty, equality, freedom, lessons of courage, patience, sacrifice, and standing up to oppression and injustice. These are universal values that we draw now from the martyrdom of Imam Hussain and his companions. And one of the speakers mentioned Gandhi as one of the Imam Hussein's followers. And when Gandhi was asked about Christianity, he said, "I love Jesus. I just wish the Christians acted more like him." That's what we want, us as Christians. Christianity that looks like Jesus, that acts like Jesus. We want to live like the version of our faith that loves like Jesus, that lives like Jesus, that stirs up good trouble like Jesus did. Many Christians are good at worshipping Jesus, but not as good as following Jesus. Jesus did not come to make believers. He came to form disciples. Many Christians used our faith as a ticket into heaven and an excuse to ignore the brokenness of the world we live in. Too often Christians have promised people life after death, while many people were wondering if there is life before death. Christians have been obsessed with saving people from hell while ignoring the hells that they're living through right now. We've talked about souls, but not as much as about systems. And I do believe in personal salvation, but I also believe in social transformation. So when Gandhi mentioned those values of religious tolerance, he also articulated the theology of interfaith cooperation and invited his colleagues of other faiths to do the same. He ended his speech by praying for an end to all fanaticism, of all persecutions, with the sword or the pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between people heading the way to the same goal. So I want to draw your attention now to our local, well, into our own context here on the island, in Ireland, and the recent turmoil that we've all been witnessing, because somehow it is relevant. We've witnessed weeks of intercultural unrest and damage to individuals and communities. We have witnessed destruction of long-established properties and businesses, and we have witnessed intimidation of places of refuge for those seeking safety and dignity. Many of the victims of these crimes are those who have had no choice but to flee their homelands and to arrive somewhere where they had very little awareness of. This has happened right across our island of Ireland. It has been festering for months. Men, women and children have all been caught in the fire and the crossfire. And such hatred knows no borders. This rhetoric was cleverly orchestrated and cleverly disseminated with a malevolent intention. And this forced displacement of people in today's world is an ongoing reality. And that requires our collective attention and compassion. Millions of people live lives as destitute and dispossessed in a world marked by stark realities of poverty, exploitation, hunger and violence. How do we respond to this challenge? How we treat people of all faiths, beliefs and worldviews who come to live among us serves as a true measure of our character. Allowing hysteria and hatred to take root diminishes us all, and the victimization of the vulnerable is a stain on our society. One of the particularly disturbing features of the current situation is that anybody who looks or sounds differently is potentially a target. Those who have spoken and acted with bravery and compassion, countering these voices of hatred and intimidation, have shown us, have shown everyone, that there is always and will always be another way. Our values are those of inclusion, dialogue, encounter that is open-minded and open-hearted. Cultural curiosity goes hand in hand with personal respect to build a new society and to enrich a tired society. Others have already called on everyone to speak kindly to our neighbours, particularly those who are exposed and fearful for themselves, their elders, their children. We encourage such initiatives, which are the building blocks of societal trust. So, those are our values, and this is where we bring our inspiration, and we take our inspiration from Imam Hussain and the values that he stood for when he stood there on the fields of Karbala. So, inspired by these immense leaders, we must do more than search for common human values. We must learn to make space for difference, even and especially and at the heart of our monotheistic imagination. The global future will call for something stronger than the earlier doctrines of toleration and pluralism. and it is a new understanding that the unity of the Creator is expressed in the diversity of creation. The test of faith is whether I could make space for difference. Can I recognize God's image of someone whose image, language, and faith ideals are different from mine? If I cannot, then I have made God in my image, instead of allowing Him to meet me as He is, just as the natural environment depends on biodiversity. Our human environment depends on human cultural diversity, because no one civilization encompasses all the spiritual, ethical, and artistic expression of mankind. So failure to respect diversity has already led to so many tragedies in the history of humanity. So, salam.
Short and sweet to the point. This is brings me to Dermot Delaney, our guest from the Irish Imam. I'm honoured to have him again this year to shed light towards the direction the conference is moving now. So Dermot, please.
Thank you so much. This will be short. You'll be glad to hear. Probably for me to be trying to preach to people who know much more about the subject of the conference than I do. But I'd like to thank you, Suraj, for the invite and for the opportunity to speak to you today. But I'll introduce myself and just some of the work that we do in the diversity unit. It's an honour to be here and to have the opportunity to speak on behalf of Garda Síochána. I'm delighted to tell you about that. Dermot Delaney is my name, and I'm the Sergeant with the National Diversity Unit. We're stationed in Garda headquarters. Our primary function of the Diversity Unit is to ensure that Garda Síochána's policing services are accessible to everybody in Irish society. Our mission is greatly assisted by the support shown by community leaders with whom we work with in friendship and with respect. So again, I'd like to thank Suraj for his support over the years. Garda Síochána has a proud tradition of serving communities and protecting the state with over 16,000 dedicated Garda members, civilians and Garda reserves committed to the objective of ensuring that a functioning police and security service is the cornerstone of a democratic and progressive society. We are committed to delivering our service to all Irish society based on our core values of honesty, accountability, respect, professionalism and empathy. The founding Commissioner Michael Staines envisaged that the success of Garda Síochána would be dependent on its moral authority as servants of the people. Through engagement, partnership and dialogue, we have a valuable opportunity to further develop and enhance the positive relationship between Garda Síochána and the Shia community in Ireland. The Diversity Unit plays an integral role in liaising and building robust relationships through that regular and ongoing engagement. We develop and train and support a network of Garda diversity officers around Ireland to actively engage with and attend to the concerns of our communities. They are stationed in every Garda division around the country. And the role includes overcoming communication barriers through active engagement, open dialogue and collaboration. They encourage and facilitate the reporting and investigation, prosecution of hate crime, and support victims of hate crime by identifying their particular needs, providing reassurance and acting as a liaison with necessary support services. The list of diversity officers is available on the Garda website, and they're ready and willing to engage with communities with respect to their safety concerns, hate crime victimisation or any other policing matter. A partnership-based approach to policing is essential to ensuring community safety. Whether this is to support our campaigns, initiatives, or to highlight a challenge or concern within the community, or even to highlight areas where you think policing could improve, I would urge you to engage with your local diversity officer or with the National Diversity Unit. We will engage with you on that matter. My friend Adrian mentioned the current social climate in Ireland. And challenging racism and discrimination in Irish society is not a pleasing matter in itself. it's a societal response that's required. The Gardaí are available, they're on the ground. Our diversity officers are in each Garda division. So again, go onto the Garda website, have a look and see who your diversity officer is. Contact my own office, diversity@garda.ie is our email address. It's an easy one to remember. And we'll speak to you and we'll engage with you. Cooperation from the public. The policing will fail and fail and fail again if we don't have the support of our communities. So when I referenced Michael Staines, our original Garda Commissioner, 102 years since the creation of Garda Síochána, kind of a little history lesson. Garda Síochána was established at the time of civil war in Ireland. So two sides, fully armed, and you might wonder sometimes why regular police in Ireland we walk around unarmed. And that came from a point in time where another armed force in the state would only make things worse. To not be seen as to be one side or the other, or a threat to one side or the other, the decision was taken to put together an unarmed police service. So the moral authority he talks about is only by consent of the people will policing be successful. Only through cooperation of people to report crimes to us, to step forward and provide statements when we're a witness to a crime, and to engage with us is the secret to security, is the secret to successful policing. So I would urge anybody who has been victimised to come forward, to speak to the Gardaí, to give us the opportunity to pursue that. And if you feel that the policing service you received is not what it should be, then to pursue that, come approach my office and we'll deal with that. And we can start to challenge what we're seeing more and more in society. And also my teachers from primary school used to say very often, empty vessels make most noise. The amplification of social media, we're hearing a lot of noise. But when you go and walk around, overwhelmingly people are committed to human rights, to freedoms. It's up to society to challenge these empty vessels. We'll do that together through cooperation. Thank you again, Suresh, for your attention.
Thank you, Dermot, for coordinating continuous support to the conference. And indeed, the Gardaí role in the society is the guardian of the people. I have a privilege to be part of them since we formed the first Garda multicultural unit in Store Street Garda Station on the Bertie Iron was the Taoiseach at that time. The very first, we're talking about 20 odd years, maybe 25 years ago. Ever since, through your colleagues, John McInerney and all the other colleagues, the interaction with that. And recently, I don't know if anybody saw, there was a documentary on Garda Síochána on RT1, the history of Gardaí, and how they came about. It's important that we are sort of like considered to be the minority within the minority of Islam, and therefore our relationship should be cordial and very strong with the security forces of this nation, which is constantly changing with the emergence of the various cultures and various nationalities and various diversity within the diversity is happening. One thing which I always have a fear of is the intra-culture, because those cultures who are coming from a different background have a history of conflict in their country, with neighbor country, and all of them are here now. And that is another interesting thing, that sometimes the tension can rise, not with the indigenous community, but with the host, with the intra-community within themselves. So we're really grateful that we have a relationship and may continue with our mosque and Biltan and Hussain and all that. I think at this point people are a bit bored. We should have a tea break and we come back with two more speakers. Dr. Kazemi here, and of course my three speakers The closing remark would be Professor Jude, who has kindly offered us to host this afternoon with us and extended his hospitality. So we have a tea and coffee in this room, so have a quick break of water and tea, coffee, there's a loo there as well. And then we'll come back and continue with the rest of the speech. Thank you very much. Start with the, or you want to start, or but then John has been turned with patiently waited. So I'd like to introduce John Hawkins. So do introduce yourself to people who don't know you. We know you, but please do reflect what your taking from this afternoon is and what you want to reflect. Thank you very much, John. Please. Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Some of you I know, not that many. I'm an Irish Methodist minister. I know Suraj because we both used to attend a small committee called the Three Faiths Forum. We were drawn from Jewish, Christian and Muslim backgrounds. I think, Suraj, we died of COVID. I think
we did. We haven't resurrected ourselves.
Or else we've got long COVID. We just haven't got back together after we stopped meeting at that point. I did say to Suraj, I rang him up and said, look, I'm not qualified to talk about Imam Hussain or to talk about the Battle of Karbala. I was very pleased to have an excellent introduction to that, and I look forward to reading the books that are on display here, but thank you for that. Where's our second speaker? I very much appreciated your comment on the stand taken by the students at Trinity in challenging the authorities here to look at investments and ethical investments with regard to the war in Gaza. I'm a student of Trinity College, but not in theology, in geology. So I've got a PhD in hill climbing. I'm not going to talk about the Imam today. I'm going to try to focus on an issue that should be of importance to the three faiths, and that's the issue of treating other people as we would like them to treat us. I suppose the issue of basic humanity and justice, and again that was referred to in our first address. 2,000 years ago there were two very famous rabbis in Palestine. One of them, Hillel, upheld a liberal and tolerant approach to the interpretation of Jewish law. There are hundreds of them. His rival, Shammai, on the other hand, was a rigorous disciplinarian. He wanted the laws to be applied to the letter. A would-be convert came to Shammai and said, Rabbi, could you interpret the law for me simply whilst you are standing on one leg? Shammai picked up a stick and drove it away. There was going to be no compromise so far as he was concerned. When Hillel was asked the same question, he stood on one leg and said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbour. This is the whole of the law. All the rest is commentary." In the Hadith, I understand the Prophet Muhammad said, "Not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you wish for yourself." The same principle is to be found in Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Chinese religious traditions, and in the Christian scriptures. if we had learned this simple golden rule of treating others as we would like them to treat us, we would not have sectarian divisions within faiths or between faiths. We would be spared conflict between tribes and nations. Ukraine, Sudan, Gaza would look very different. We would not be seeing the anti-immigrant racism that Adrian referred to in his address, and which has been such a distressing feature both in Ireland and in England in the last few weeks. As an ecumenical accompanier, I went as a human rights monitor to the West Bank of Gaza in 2016. It's a program of the World Council of Churches to go and stand alongside vulnerable communities who are living under Israeli occupation. Whilst I was queuing at Ben Gurion Airport, I entered into a conversation with a Jewish man who was born in the Crimea, who now lives in America, but who intends to emigrate to Israel when he retires. He said he was some sort of environmental scientist, though he didn't believe in climate change, so I'm not sure where he got his ideas from. Noting that I came from Dublin, he said, "Why is Ireland the most anti-Semitic country in the world?" I said, "Well, that's not true. In the main, Irish people are not racist or anti-Jewish, but they do have a strong sense of justice, and they are opposed to the policies of Israel in the way that it treats Palestinians." On reflection, this was not a very wise conversation to get into as I was going to try to enter through Ben Gurion Airport, so I was very happy when he was called forward by the immigration officer. But how come that a guy from Europe, who is now an American citizen, is able to go and live in the land that is holy to Christians, Muslims and Jews and have full rights, whilst people who are the descendants of refugees who were driven out of that land in 1948 are not allowed to return to their homes and villages? Well, it's to do, of course, with nationalism. Zionism is a form of Jewish nationalism that claims the right of Jews to return to the Holy Land. It grew out of European anti-Semitism and the pogroms of the Russian Empire. Early Zionists wanted to establish a place of safety for Jews, and they saw this as the answer to centuries of discrimination within Christian Europe. They were supported in this attitude by British imperialist interests. Now, I grew up in Britain, so I know a bit about this. The British imperialists thought that the Jewish immigrants would be useful allies in controlling their interests in the Middle East. The first Mandate governor of Mandate Palestine, Stores, said that he wanted to create a little loyal Jewish Ulster in the Middle East amidst a sea of potentially hostile Arabism. Divide and rule. Get some people on your side to stand up against the others. British interest, of course, was in securing the oil pipeline from Iraq. It was in controlling the approaches to the Suez Canal, and it was in imperial prestige. What a wonderful thing to be in charge of Jerusalem. But there was another thing, Christian Zionism. Lord Balfour, he of the Declaration, believed, as so many Americans do today, that the return of Jews to the Holy Land would trigger Armageddon and the end of the world, in which the redeemed will be saved. Christian Zionists, of course, believe that they will be raptured up into heaven, and the rest of us, that's you lot and me, well, we've had it. Ben-Gurion, the founder of the modern state of Israel, believed that to create a Jewish majority state, it was necessary to drive out most of the Arab population. In 1948, 60% of the Palestinian people were driven from their homes. Over 500 villages were bulldozed and trees were planted over the wreckage. This process is continuing today. The Nakba, the catastrophe, continues as Jewish settlements are expanded onto conquered territories. In 2018, the Jewish national state law asserts that Israel is the historic homeland of the Jewish people and they have an exclusive right to national self-determination in it. The law also refers to the development of Jewish settlement as a national value and will act to encourage and promote its establishment. Israeli human rights organizations like Yesh Din and B'Tselem point out that the discriminatory rights and laws and privilege of Jews over against Palestinians qualifies as apartheid under international rights laws such as the Rome Statutes. In last week's Irish Times, there was a piece by Sally Hayden. She described a visit to some of the settlements in the West Bank. There are over 700,000 people in these settlements, which are built on Palestinian-owned land. In July, the United Nations International Court of Justice judged that the continuing occupation of Palestine and the settlements are illegal and should be ended as soon as possible. The settlers that Sally Hayden met said that the land is theirs. It was given to them by God. This is a central Zionist belief, and in 2019 the Israeli diplomat Danny Danon, who was the ambassador of Israel to the UN, stood up in the Security Council, held the Bible and said, "Here is our title deed to the land of Israel." He meant everything between the Mediterranean Sea and the River Jordan, and also a big slice of the state of Jordan as well. Israel has never defined its borders and is always seeking to expand them. So, how do we understand the land promises that are there in Hebrew scriptures, which Christians refer to as the Old Testament? A former staff member of the Irish School of Ecumenics, Johnston McMaster, points out that the Hebrew scriptures were written and formulated during the period of captivity in Babylon 2,500 years ago. And in Babylon there was an annual New Year festival in which the king of Babylon was declared to be in the image of God. The Hebrew theologians of the exile, however, said that all people, male and female, were made in the image of God. They democratized the theological view that there was in the Babylonian Empire. In the biblical vision, people are included in and not thrust out. There is protection for the weak and the economically disadvantaged. There is to be no hierarchy of esteem regarding human worth. This ideal, of course, is expressed in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which affirms all people are born equal in dignity and in rights. The Palestinian theologian Munter Isaac of Bethlehem points out that the biblical definition of Israel extends from the river Nile to the river Euphrates. He says, look, this was the whole known world at the time, and rather than Israel being chosen for special privilege, it was chosen to model a new form of belonging in society, where the poor were protected and included in, where slaves were freed, and where men and women could live in harmony. Let me quote from a Church of Ireland report on the Promised Land. Puts it like this: promises about the land of Israel shouldn't be intended to be taken literally or applying to a defined geographical territory. They are a way of speaking about how to live under God so that justice and peace reign, the poor and weak are protected, the stranger is included, and all have a share in the community and a contribution to make to it. The Promised Land in the Bible is not a place so much as a metaphor for how things ought to be amongst the people of God. This Promised Land can be found or built anywhere. Well, amen to that. I've written on a couple of occasions to the current Israeli ambassador. Like her predecessors, she doesn't answer letters, or at least she doesn't answer mine. I pointed out to her that the targeting of civilians and the taking of hostages are war crimes under international humanitarian law. So the events of the 7th of October of last year come under the category of violations of humanitarian law. I went on to quote the United Nations Secretary General that the events of October 2003 did not happen in a vacuum, but happened in the context of decades of oppression and occupation. I pointed out that disproportionate retaliation, the destruction of civilian infrastructure, homes, hospitals, schools, universities, water and sewage services, the denial of adequate food and water are also war crimes that Israel is guilty of. The International Criminal Court is looking for the arrest of Hamas leaders and Israeli government officials, including the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense. The highest court of the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, is investigating what they describe are plausible cases of genocide against Israel for the conduct of the war in Gaza. So far, 40,000 children, women and men have been killed. Almost the entire population has been displaced time after time with no safe place to go to. Health facilities, schools, churches, mosques have been destroyed. In the West Bank, over 500 people have been killed by settlers and Israeli soldiers in the past 10 months. The process of annexation and ethnic cleansing continues. Palestinian representatives who come to Ireland talk about the double standards of the West in its attitude towards Israel. They point out that after 1 week of the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, sanctions were applied on Russia. After decades of occupation of Palestinian lands by Israel, countries such as the US, Britain, Germany are still supplying weapons, and in the case of America, providing diplomatic cover for the continuing occupation. Now, Ireland has a fairly good reputation amongst Palestinians, probably a better reputation than we deserve. When the Dáil recognised the state of Palestine in May of this year, this was widely welcomed, and Irish politicians spoke eloquently, said the right things about justice and solidarity, but there is so much more to do. The Occupied Territories Bill should be enacted. This bill would ban trade with any places that are deemed to be illegally occupied by other countries, including, of course, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, Gaza. The divestment from illegal settlements bill should be enacted. This bill and the Occupied Territories Bill are in line with government policy that the occupation is illegal, so why don't we act on that? We should end the agreement to purchase military targeting drones from Israel. Currently, Ireland spends, I think it's €7 million worth of money on Israeli military equipment. We should actively support the South African case of genocide against Israel in the International Criminal Court. We should be more vigorous in demanding that the EU-Israel Association Agreement that offers preferential trade arrangements between Europe and Israel should be suspended until Israel complies with the human rights conditions that are attached to that agreement. All these measures are a basic minimum response. Personally, I would like to see real sanctions applied against the regime in Israel as long as it defies international human rights law. I was an observer in South Africa in 1994 that saw the first multi-ethnic elections and saw the end of apartheid. One of the things that brought apartheid South Africa to its senses was international pressure. We need to do the same with Israel. But in the end, it all boils down to creating an international order where we treat other people as we would like to be treated ourselves. This is the golden rule that should apply to our personal lives and to our conduct as nations and states in our relationships with one another. Thank you very much.
Not more could be said the way John put together the current situation, and the reason he's in this conference is that I think if you draw the parallel between Karbala and Palestine and Gaza, it will make more sense to you to realize what has happened 1,400 years ago in Karbala is happening right now in front of our eyes in Gaza. Today, school has been bombed. Today, 100 children have been killed, and in the pretext of the Hamas are hiding there. So this is something somebody has said, even in their own military guys said that you cannot eliminate Hamas. You cannot eliminate the resistance. when it comes to that. And Antonio Guterres has said exactly the same thing, that the September 7th of October attack was not happening in a vacuum. I always have a small program on radio every Thursday, in South FM, and I talked about it, this particular issue, and I said, look, what happened on the 6th of October? What happened on the 5th of October? And so on and so forth. Why are you picking up the 7th of October as a date for atrocities that you are inflicting upon the innocent children, women, and defenseless people? And this is an ongoing thing, but the thing is that you all have seen how Zionism is the reality of the ground. We cannot do anything. We are helpless in that sense. Irish people are doing excellent when it comes to demonstration on the street, our policies, recognizing Palestine as a state. My discussions goes back to a scholar who is no longer around, Edward Said, who has written about Palestine, a Christian Palestinian who lectured in the US. And Edward Said visited Ireland, and we had a coffee discussion with him. He talked about the situation, and he said this is the chronic situation. At that time, he criticized, of course, the two nations theory and all the rest of it. And in fact, he was in support when Yasser Arafat has talked about it. And nobody talks about two nations theory. Nobody discusses the rights of Palestinian people. But what can be done about that in the context of the teaching of Imam Hussain is something that do to you others as you would expect others to do to you. But the resistance is winning. That's the reality of the ground. Their dreams have been diminished, and this is the problem in the world, that the expansion in Lebanon has diminished, and they defeated there in the 80s. But that's what the reality of the ground is, that what can you do in the interest of saving a helpless nation? And when it comes to the helpless nation, there is a trust exists in Ireland called the Palestinian Holocaust Trust. And I've been participating in their meeting. I think there should be a trust in the name of Palestinian in Ireland. There should be a Palestinian trust in Ireland, which would reflect the 70 years history since 1948 of how that nation has been treated. And it should be inculcated in the history books of children in Ireland and school books, the way the Holocaust history has been taught to the children in Ireland. So a lot of work's to be done in the light of those who believe in the humanity and believe in the palpitation of the existence of common human values. As I said, this is history is unfolding in front of our eyes, and we cannot take away each day 9 o'clock news, Irish Times, you take it, Palestine is getting more and more. But it's getting interesting in a sense that resistance is also increasing day by day, and it will win the situation in the end. May I now like to invite Dr. Kazim to say a few words. The charge of the affair from the Embassy of Islamic Republic.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I would like to thank you, Mr. Saraj, for inviting me to be participated here and learning a lot from the speakers today. Mr. Saraj asked me to give some words, but I said you have enough speakers, but Mr. Saraj emphasized, and I would like to share a few points all of you. Just I would like, many words have been shared by previous speakers, especially at the last, Mr. John, that we were in touch before that about the Palestine too. Just I would like to share about the 3 points. Why we should know history. Why history is important. Just for saving some information in our minds, for the amusements, to share with our children the history, like that. And some facts about the Imam Hussain, Ashura, Arbain. About this second point, the previous speaker shared many points maybe I don't mention too much about that. At the end, third point, what is the relevance between Ashura, Arba'ins, and Karbala with the present activity? And some of them mentioned by John. First of all, why we should know history? Many historians, and maybe all real historians, say each nation don't know history won't have any future, because it emphasizes the importance of the history. If we see the history of the islands, many lessons from the Irish history for all of the world, not just for the Irish people. 700 years Irish was occupied in the colonial powers by the UKs, and by resistance islands could be freed. There is a many story in that regards. I don't want to interfere in that history because I myself was interested to the history, was working in the archives. I can give you many things by the history, especially real history, not all variations. Most of the real history should come from the facts, from the archives. You should compare the narrations together. In this ways, we can learn a lot about the history. So, I think all of us are agree that history is important in all of the world, in many countries. If I make this conference is the Imam Hussain conference, we should say some sentence about the Imam Hussain, Karbala, Arba'ins too. One of the things about these great events is the universal themes and value by the Imam Hussain's and the things happening in the Karbala. It was just for a Shia, just for a Muslim? No, absolutely not. It was about the human dignity, human rights, about the freedom, about the justice, battling against the oppressions of the peoples and injustice. It was the reason that Imam Hussain had a revolution. And one thing I wanted to emphasize and that Imam Hussain paid the most important their lives, the families, the children, 6,000 children, for these international values, the human values for them. So the important things not achieved free. Nobody will give us free for these things. If you see the Irish history, if you see go to the archives, for example, see many things happening for Irish history before 1921, Irish independence year. Many battles happened, all of you know, and I know some of them too. So for this kind of the value, we should sacrifice something, we should pay for that. It doesn't happen very easily. Another things, what inspirations for these events for the other. For example, Mr. Slade mentions about the Gandhi and some other speakers too mentioned about that. And many authors and persons, not Muslims, authors and scholars, talking and having books about the Imam Hussain and the things happening in Ghana. One of the important persons is Edward Brown. He's a British author, famous author, having a very comments about the Ashura, about the Imam Hussain, what's happening exactly, and the lesson of that events for these days. Again, these days we have facing to the Arba'ins walk in the Karbala, in Arabs. What is the message of that? It's a very huge demonstration to take attention of the peoples, what was the Karbala, or what done by Imam Hussain, and so it is one of the most important demonstrations in the world in that regard. So this lesson should come to the next generations, to the students to talk about that, not just for the memorize that and saving some information in the practice. Fortunately, these days we have many reasons to take a lesson of that of this Arba'in and Ashura in that regard. I wanted to share a few points to make a bridge from Karbala 1,400 years ago to the present times. And John mentions many of that, the things happening in the Gaza and in the Palestine. Let's start from just last night, that Mr. Suraj mentioned in his comments. Exactly just what we demonstrates to the schools in the morning prayers. More than 100 children, women, civilians has been killed. There is a question. Israel done it? Israel is allowed to doing this? Israel can continue such a genocide in that regard? The next hard question. Also, we should ask the question. We are commitments these genocides to or not? Maybe all of us say no. We don't have any responsibility for that. There is a very famous proverb we say in the Arabic, كل يوم العاشوراء كل أرض كربلاء. What does it mean? All the time is Ashura. All the land is Karbala. When there is oppressions, when there is injustice, when there is occupation, there is a land of the Karbala, there is a time of the Ashura. We should be against of that. We should prevent of that. John mentioned about the human rights, about the international law. You know, more than 500 resolutions by the United Nations has been taken against Israel. 500. What happens? As Mr. Sarge mentions, what about the 6th of the October and before that? Just 1 month before the 7th of October, Irish high-level delegation visited the occupied land and mentioned, if you Google it, you can find it. Michael Martin in that time was a minister right now and visited that area just 1 month in the occupied land and mentioned 250 Palestinians has been killed by the Israeli army. 250. And what happens? There is any hope? Let's back to the Irish history. There is one very famous point of the Irish history, Munster meetings. Munster meeting. All of you know about the Daniel O'Connell districts, and all the time people demonstrated there. And we researched about the O'Connell, what happened. Daniel O'Connell's organized big meetings against the colonial occupations. And in that times, UK's army was ready to kill people, gathered there for freedom. O'Connell scared, if I started the meetings, maybe many people will be murdered, will be killed. So O'Connell, because he was a peaceful-oriented, canceled that meeting. What's happened after that? Nothing. Many historians, I talked with them in the Trinity College, in the DCU, UCD, believes that without any resistance group, especially military resistance group, never ever Ireland couldn't be independent, because many peaceful activity before that happens. If you go to the Great Famine, please visit it. There is 4 exhibitions and a museum about the Irish famine, Irish Great Famine, which 2 million has been disappeared, 1 million has been killed, and 1 million immigrated to the rest of the world. And in Iran we have a great famine too, but 8 million has been killed inside of the Iran. The same reason, the same unfortunately catastrophic results. But I wanted to say the powers needed, the serious sentence. As I said, 500,000 resolutions by the UN has been taken. No result, no fruitful for the Palestinians. After 8 decades, 7 decades, no result for the Palestinians. There is no solution for them. In some Western country, when you're talking about the Hamas, because of the unfortunately some social media, they think that they are tourist groups. Please show me one papers United Nations say Hamas is a tourist group. One paper, show it. The next, after the day after that, I will say Hamas is a terrorist group. It's the narration by some Western country. I don't want to interpret to the details of it. So, if you see to the island, fortunately, many pro-Palestine in the people levels, especially, and also government, and many in the rest of the world, in the UK, in the United States, the student you see what's happening. But unfortunately, a few powers just supporting Israeli, as John emphasized on that, not just politically, financially, militarily they support, they give Israelis equipment, modern equipment, and also one of the more intelligent supports to the Israelis. And Israelis passed all red line. Just one thing I think can stop Israelis to genocide, not just having the United Nations resolution, not just talking. There is should be, as John mentioned, sanction, real sanction, ban the financial supports, the military supports. It may be could Israelis stops in that regard, and in that ways we have all of us has a responsibility. There is a between friendly talking, between Shia, some of them as a friendly talking. We say, I wish I be at the during the Karbala, I could do something support Imam Hussain. Now Imam Hussain is available. If you are a support, if you are follower of the Imam Hussain, yeah, there is a battle of the Imam Hussain. In this time, if you are real in your sentences, you can do by writing in the social media, say some words and some action, different people in different way. But being silent, but just whisper some words, nothing works. And in our minds, when we are allowed, maybe we are not happy to do nothing about that. And I thank all of you, patience to listen to me, and a special thanks for the speakers today. I learned a lot, and also Mr. Siraj, and also a special thanks to the John. I know in details John working on the Palestine. He produced many contents about this injustice and occupations, and it is very important to continue this ways to. We can have a different way, but exactly all of us has a common area too, against any occupation, against genocide, against attacking to the, all of this area, we are common together. We should have some action about it. Again, thank you all, and thank you, Mr. Saraj.
Anytime the president, we know the details. Thank you so much. See you in August. Thank you. We know what the key point is, that what are we doing and what can we do physically and mentally and socially and with pen on the social media. Somebody texted me a very interesting thing. He said, look, go to the Google and type the capital of Israel and come to Jerusalem, and to go back with the 3 dots and say wrong information. It's not that. So therefore it's the capital of Palestine. So this is the tiny act on social media one could do in order to make your contribution to it. Freedom, people talked about it. No nation has received or got freedom without sacrifice. And this point is a very important point. Imam says what we are talking about proudly to the world today is that he sacrificed entire member of his entire family, companions, old people, 80-year-old Habib ibn Mazahir, his friend, Muslim ibn Hussain, the older soldiers, 80 years old, 6 months old baby, 13-year-old nephew, and all that entire family members he sacrificed. That's what he achieved. What Imam says that achieved today is that the relevance to that is that resistance are losing. They will achieve something, that because the freedom is not given, it's taken. Unless you resist something, unless what you have today, and if you don't keep an eye on your deposit account, the bank will take away your money. In
charges this and charges that, and that's how banks operate. They take it away, you know. So you've got to be clever in a sense that how can you protect something which is yours? Freedom is a very precious thing, and it can always be taken unless, it's not naturally given to you. Benjamin Netanyahu is not going to come and say, please take Palestine. This is something resistance only can understand. The language of resistance has to be stronger, powerful, and robust in the world of today, in any form and shapes. Enough said about that. You all know what to do, what not to do. In the context of Imam Hussain, I wanted to drag that thing which is currently happening among us. I think the time will be a little bit for cross-questioning, and we will have a bouncing of some questions. We'll be listening to people. Finally, I would like to invite Professor Jude from the Humanities Department of Humanities Studies, kindly offering us his space and hosting us this afternoon. So if you can conclude and close the conference officially, and then we'll open up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siraj. It's a blessing to host this event here in the Irish School of Economics. I am an associate professor. You can say I'm brown, not white. I don't consider the Irish as white because they were the oppressed, but it's becoming slowly white. You can see on the streets. And this is a great space to reflect on this day, what it means, as all of you very clearly articulated for us today, the life and the battle of Imam Hussain and the battle of Karbala. The battle of Karbala has in a way sunk into my heart and mind as the Calvary. I don't see a difference. There's a total fusion of these great historical moments. What is it that exactly, as you all very clearly articulated, happened at the Battle of Karbala? It is nothing else. A battle between a man, not a divine being, who totally surrendered to God, Allah, and an emperor who totally relied on the might of the military. And the result was not only martyrdom of Imam Hussain, but also victory of humanity that has ripple effects, as Siraj and others very clearly said, throughout the ages. And for me, coming from a Christian background, the same can be imagined, same can be upheld with regard to the crucifixion of Jesus. And I don't see a difference at the core of the spirituality of both men. Now, coming to the second point. On the day that the US President went to Tel Aviv after October 7th, in his meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister, the latter said, Mr. President, this is not a clash of civilizations. This is a battle between civilization and barbarism. And he repeated the same very recently in Washington. What is barbarism? Resistance. What is civilization? The most powerful military of the world and its allies Now, we have children here. What is it that we all, I have a son, who is 16 years old. What is it that we want to offer to our next generation? A civilization defined by the most sophisticated weaponry that the entire human history has witnessed. Is that what we want to offer as a civilization to our sons and daughters? I have no part in it. I have no part in it. The violence of the oppressor is million times lethal and destructive than the violence of the oppressed. Let me say it very bluntly. Resistance can be waged in multiple ways. But as Martin Luther King Jr. very clearly said, I can't speak about Hanoi, nor about Moscow, nor about Beijing, nor about Havana, nor about the violence of the black kids in the ghettos until and unless I condemn the violence of my own state. And that is utmostly ethical. That is utmostly ethical. You can't preach non-violence. You can't preach non-violence. You have to practice non-violence. You can't preach non-violence. Third point. It's only through resistance, dialogue, and then reconciliation can take place. It's only through resistance that dialogue and resistance can take place. We have been accused of being anti-Semitic. Are we? No. I strongly believe the greatest scriptures of Judaism. And I believe strongly that Jesus is the first century Palestinian Jew, which Christianity has forgotten at least until the Second World War. I know in my deepest of heart that Jews were vilified for ages, and Christianity claimed supremacy over the Jewish people. And at the same time, I know, in creating the first Catholic state in Spain in 1492, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand issued edicts of expulsion, first against the Jews and against the Muslims. In the 15th century, when they left the Iberian Empire, who welcomed them as refugees? The Muslim Ottoman Empire. Muslim Ottoman Empire. I say this in public, everywhere I go. And now we call about the Judeo-Christian civilization. There has never ever been a Judeo-Christian civilization in the West, only a Christian civilization. And what is it that lies underneath the rhetoric of Judeo-Christian Western civilization? Islamophobia. Islamophobia. Let me say the next point. At the heart of what is happening in Palestine lies not only an occupation, a brutal occupation, and an unfolding genocide, but also Islamophobia. That cannot be forgotten. That cannot be forgotten. And then, let's also not forget, why is the war not being stopped? When the apex body like the Security Council and the ordinary men and women on the street are well aware. What? As we said, it's the most reported genocide in history. In our naked eyes. The Irish government positions are symbolic and rhetorical. It's okay. It's okay. At least there's space, a relative space, but it doesn't work. Why is war going on? In the analysis of some of my colleagues and friends, at the expense of the bodies of the Palestinians and their land, the main target is Iran. The US wants Iran to get back to the war game. The US wants Iran to come to the war game. And Iran is restraining. Lebanon is restraining. Even Yemen is restraining. But despite all the resolutions of the Human Rights Council, the US wants the war to continue and make the Middle East a permanent battleground, promising peace in the world. So what does the empire promise? It promises peace and security while keeping our world in a permanent state of warfare. That's exactly the logic of this civilization, which they call under their hegemony, under their power. So what is the message of Imam Hussain? Surrender only to Allah, no to any world power, at the expense of lives, at the expense of his own life, for the sake of humanity, for the sake of our children, for the sake of nature, for the sake of all what we cherish as spiritual, ethical, religious. There can be only two religions in the world, whether it is Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, Jewish, Muslim or Christian. That is faith that is blind, faith that believes in the might of the military and the empire, and the faith that believes in God. It is God, Allah, praise be their name, who is totally incapable of dominating. I repeat, God is totally incapable of dominating. God is totally incapable of dominating. We human beings are asked not to dominate. Not to dominate. Authority of any religious leader arises from not dominating, standing for the most powerless, standing for the most vulnerable, standing for the most marginalized. That is where the authority arises. And in conclusion, let me read two poems and wind up. One from Pedro Casal de Liga, a Brazilian Catholic bishop who left Spain. As you know, Spain colonized, Portugal colonized the Americas just after the Crusades. And then Casal de Liga, in our century, decided to go to Amazonia to pay for the sins of the past crimes of the Holy Roman Catholic Empire. And he became an ordinary man, a peasant. He's one of the greatest poets. Joined the struggles of the indigenous people. And then he writes this poem. I have a godless faith and a revolutionary love. They call me a subversive, and I will reply, I am. I live for my people in struggle. I march with my people on their way. And between gospel and song, I suffer and say what I want. If I scandalize, I started by burning my own heart in the flame of the passion, cross of his own word. I incite to subversion against power, military, and money. I call order evil and progress alive. I have less peace than anger. I have more love than peace. I have more love than peace. False peace.
Here.
Let me finish with the last poem, the last sentence of one of those beloved poets from Palestine, Imam. His poetry is on my desk here. Many of my colleagues haven't read, unfortunately, others. The last stages of his life, he wrote a beautiful piece where he captured Jesus' lament on the cross. My Lord, why did you abandon me? Today the gospel say, God knows what is going on. What is it that humanity is doing? Now Darwish, after writing his poetry on this lament of Jesus, finishes, this is also the last pages of Darwish's life, finishes the poem with one sentence. And I just want to finish what I say here with that sentence. Life defined as the opposite of death is not life. I repeat, life defined as the opposite of death is not life. That is why we still not only commemorate, we still cry, we still immensely devote our lives to the martyrdom of Imam Hussain. Life defined as the opposite of death is not life. He did not define his life against death. There is more to life than death. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Jude. What a passionate way you've come across the thoughts of summarizing it, so much so. It's all in, as I said, in Quran as well. We say in Quran that those who die as martyrs are not dead, nay, they are alive. And their existence are given by the gods to them. So, I mean, to understand alive, we have example of this. How can you describe this picture? This is the holy shrine of Imam Hussain. 40 million, 30 million, every Arba'in gathered together. This is the reflection and the living proof of Hussain and his struggle for mankind. That's all I can say. Now, I think we should open up the discussion, and we